And we're live. What's up, dude?
What's up, my man?
Oh man, I just finished a jog, and my right ear sweats more than my left ear, so my AirPods are constantly in danger of falling out. And I didn't give myself enough time to cool down before hopping into this. And now
Oh no.
one headphone just keeps on popping out. What are you
Worst
up
when
to?
you
What's
hear your
happening?
sweat. A lot of things are going on. A lot of things are going on. We had a good weekend. We're flying this weekend to see you guys in America. I mean, not the main reason, but one of the reasons. But a
Hmm.
lot of good things are going on. This past weekend, we helped the Chabad, which is a Jewish center on campus, do a very big Friday night meal for the Sabbath. And usually
Hmm.
they get like 10 to 15 people, and this weekend they got 50 people, 50,
Nice.
and it was a
And
great
what'd
time.
you do? What'd you do to get so many more people?
When you hear Jews and you hear free, you hear Jews and free things come together. No, so
That's true.
we modeled it, and we've had a conversation off the podcast about it, where we modeled it off of the Binghamton Chabad and the Rutgers Chabad, where it's sort of like to get people in the door is the hard thing. To get people to stay is the easy thing. So getting people in the
Right.
door, the idea is to give them incentive. Like what's what's a very collegey thing, or what's a very young professional type of idea to do? Do a cocktail night. Cocktail night, mix and mingle your drinks, all those things. And it was the first Shabbat the first Sabbath that they said they closed out their list, their what do you call it, their sign up sheet in less than 5 hours.
Nice.
Yeah,
Because they were
so
so full.
they
They had
were
so many people.
they had so many people come. People were asking, and surprisingly, they only had two cancellations at the end, which is very good.
Yeah, very high, very low churn rate is what you'd call it.
Yes, so it was very good. I was very happy, and everyone started saying there's a group with like 150 people in it that Chabad like sort of throws their information into, but now people are actually active. We're sort of trying to create a board like most Chabads in America do. But that's obviously later on once we have a following and once we have people interested. And something that we want to do is sort of to make it the cool thing on campus because there's sort of this Israeli
Wait,
aloofness for.
can you explain real quickly, just because I think it's important, or at least for context, that how Israelis do college and how it's usually about
Hmm,
5 years later than the average American
for sure.
or
I am not,
European, really.
or European. Well, there's a few different things that happen here. So the first thing is that Israelis go to the army for anywhere between two
Mandatory draft.
mandatory draft for anywhere between 2.8 to 4 to 5 years. The law is 2.8, so that's 2 years and 8 months. You have a lot of people signing on. You have a lot of people that do college first and then do the army. There's a lot of different ways that you can do the army in Israel. Now, you have this.
How old do you think the average age that's joining the army, though, is being drafted is, though?
The average age is 18 and a half.
So just out of high school, usually.
So there's a bunch of things that as an American I didn't know, and I only learned when I got here. So you
Okay.
start basically, quote unquote, your actual draft starts when you're about 17. So
Okay.
depending on your weight, your size, your gender, your ability, your grades, they put you already into different workouts or they put you already into different units. So I'll mix it between what they call in Hebrew kravi, which are actual fighters that people go out to the field, and modi'in, which is intelligence. So if you're in the
Is that
intelligence,
what Modine is literally translated as? Is that what it means?
modi'in is information.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
modi'in, the actual term, like modi'in, like the city, is just a biblical term. Modi'in, I think they're spelled the same, but modi'in is information or intelligence. So when you have, let's say, in Ben Gurion Airport, you go to the information desk. It says
Oh,
modi'in.
yeah, it does say that. That's right. I
Yeah.
never know. I never put those two together before. It's so
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't know the biblical backing of it
Yeah,
because
relationship.
Modi'in,
Yeah.
like Maccabi, like it's sort of just like the whole story of Hanukkah is exactly that. It was in Modi'in. It was Modi'in, Maccabi, or in those Hashmonaim in that area.
Right.
But back to what we were going into. So basically, the draft technically starts at the age of 16, 17 when kids get into 11th grade. So it even goes
Whoa, a
further,
full year before they graduate,
a
or
full
a
year
year and a
before
half
they
even.
graduate.
Wow.
It's not everyone, but I'll take the average normal stories that I've heard, what I know, what I understand of the army. Now, there's different routes you can take, and even in the beginning. So this is where it's a little bit more European. It's more European because in high school you pick your major, which is called a megama. So you can be biology or technology or math or science or arts or
You
anything.
picked that in high school?
You pick it in high school. It's very similar to how they do it in England. In England, you
Yeah.
also pick it.
In England, I think you could study. I think you could finish. You could be a lawyer by the time you finish. Or what is it? You go straight to law school when you finish high school. Like you
Yeah,
don't have to necessarily do like undergrad and then law school.
well, they do it. I think what they do is sort of what America has, where you have the 7 year program. If you're smart enough out of high school to get into these 7 or 8 year programs, which is technically the same amount of time, it just means you take your bio 101, your biochem, your orgo, your labs, your everything in like your first year. And if you do keep the grades up and you take your MCAT, which is the medical entrance exam,
Yeah.
medical school entrance exam. You take it and then you keep on going. So I had a friend who did it at Nova, which is a school in
Yeah. Florida.
Florida. It wasn't Eitan Mendelo, but it was someone it was someone, I don't
Here.
remember
Yeah.
who. I don't remember. I'm not even calling them a friend. Someone told me they did it.
Okay.
And
Sure.
Nova has this program that's relatively new, and that's why Nova started becoming more popular because a lot of people were who did well in high school and the first year in college were able to jump into this program or system.
That's really cool. And Nova's, by the way, but I know that I mean you have to be pretty disciplined to balance because I've heard Nova's notoriously difficult and um, I mean I don't know I know maybe a handful of medical students but the ones that go to Nova seem to be under a lot more stress and academic rigor than other schools I've noticed.
I think it has to, so it's sort of like if I'm not mistaken, because I heard this about the Caribbean schools, it's a for-profit school, meaning your grades could be a little bit lower and they allow you to fail a course, but for you to stay in the school, you have to keep on paying. It's like college. If you fail a course, you have to take it again and you have to pay for it.
Hmm.
Not until you
Right.
pass, until you switch out
And
or
Nova's known to be a fortune. No, I think you fail at a certain point.
no,
You,
of
they definitely
course,
they definitely drop you out at a certain point. Like I think you have a couple of chances.
for
It's cool.
sure.
I heard that just this weekend that Nova does in terms of their they. It's so funny because we kind of experienced this in high school too. High school didn't want you applying to colleges that are outside of your quote unquote academic reach
Right.
because they want to say that they have X% success rate in getting kids into the school that they apply for, right?
Hmm.
So myself, I was a B minus B minus C plus student. They weren't telling me to apply to Maryland or NYU or anything like that, right? They're like, when you go to a community college or Yeshiva University, maybe Queens if
Uh,
you're lucky, and
YU.
so Nova apparently has pre-board exams that before you take the board, they have a harder version of the board that the school makes you take. I think you have two or three chances to pass it. Um, and then the amount of success that students have passing the Nova board and then passing the regular board, which is easier than the Nova version of it, is it's like skyrocketed since they started implementing that.
It's very
So
interesting. I
yeah,
think
so my friend just told me that he just finished that he and another classmate just took it, and they failed the first time, and they barely passed the second time, but it made them confident that by the time they get to their boards, because they passed this one, that they'd have less of a hard time with it.
yeah, I think Sackler in Israel, the medical school at Tel Aviv University, does the same thing. I think they only do it with their first because you have to take two board exams, if I'm not mistaken,
I
and
don't
they
know.
only do it with one or the other. I'm not sure, but I know that Sackler does something similar because it's not the first time I've heard this, and I didn't hear it at Nova, but I did hear it at Sackler because I've had a lot of friends at Sackler when I was there for my master's as well.
Did Solomon's wife go there?
No, she's at Beersheba.
Right. 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 Right.
which is
Okay.
also so Beersheba is also a very good school. When I was looking into medical schools, when I was crazy enough to think that I wanted to go to medical school, which
Yeah.
died very quickly.
Mm-mm.
Um,
It took a decade.
no, it took college. It took 4 years.
Yeah, but you wanted to do it
I wanted to do
for
it
the,
since,
since I've known
yeah,
you.
since yeah, I've always wanted to be a doctor, and then I wanted to be a surgeon, then I like just still a doctor. I always wanted to do the medical field, and then I came to college, and I was like, I can't do another 4 years of this. And I did well. Like my grades were good, and I was already taking practice tests for the MCAT, and I was doing fine. And I was like, I'm not interested in this. I love research. I love science. I love doing things. I love being in a lab. And that's really what
Yeah.
made me apply for my master's. And I was when I was working in Rashid, the yeshiva in Beit Shemesh, that's where I made the decision is that
Hmm.
to apply. And I remember being like, $100 for an application fee. That's a lot of
Yeah.
money.
Oh
And
yeah.
I was, yeah. And then just
Wait till the
imagining,
stu- wait, wait. If you were in med school, you'd have to wait for the student debt to start.
right.
Someone was just telling me he just started med school a semester ago, and he just finished his first semester, and he clicked onto his portal, and he was like minus $60,000 in terms of
Yep.
debt, and they're like, oh my god, it's wild.
It means a lot more. And I was speaking to, we have a family friend who's a dermatologist. And I was speaking to him like a few months ago. And he was like, the debt used to mean nothing. The debt used to mean nothing. It was always something. It was always scary. It was always it was always something very hard to deal with. But
You talking about
back,
personal debt or national debt?
I'm talking about medical school debt.
Okay, yeah, personal debt. Okay.
Personal debt. So he was like, but now, like, you look at it and like doctors aren't making as much as they used to, and medical malpractice insurance is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times what it used to be. Everyone's getting sued. You're not getting paid to be a doctor. You're getting paid to be a glorified statistician, basically. And if
Or
there's
a
a lot,
pharmacologist or
yeah,
pharmacist.
yeah, like you're a glorified, like you spent all this time and you want to like you really gotta love being a doctor to be a doctor. Like that's also something I've learned. Like you wouldn't be doing it. Like it's not because I used to have the dream of being like I was going to be the guy getting up in synagogue saying, "Hey, I'm a doctor. I'll help you with your heart attack." And like that's a dream. That's like a fallacy. That's like a self fulfilling
Why, you don't think it's
prophecy.
the case?
I think it's more than that. I think you really have to enjoy the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
process.
But I think it's why it's so hard to do is because they want to weed out the people that are just doing it, or a lot of the people. Either you have to be incredibly determined, which is, I think, a sign of character, or you have to have a passion for it, which is another sign for character. But if you
Right.
just want to do it to play hero, there's plenty of other ways to play hero, and you don't
Right.
have to go $500,000 in debt and be in school till you're 30.
100%. Like that. I mean, I'm still in school and I'm 29, but
Yeah, but
but
you'd still be a doctor.
right. That's true too. But I'm also enjoying more the process. Like I definitely, and then we'll go back to the Israeli army and everything. But
Yeah.
I enjoy the process of research because I get to use my own hands versus like, a doctor has to do the same surgery every 6 times. You see the same patients. He has strep. This one has this. You have a yeast
That's if you're a
infection.
specialist.
Yeah, but even a pediatrician sees relatively, listen, you can have fun with it and everything. But for me, it's like, I could be researching the same thing for 10 years, but I'm not doing classical biology. I'm doing biotechnology and bioengineering. So for me,
Right.
everything's a different day.
Yeah.
Today I coded something on a 3D printer so that I can use it to print my sensors so that my sensors are only going to be 10%. There's only going to be a 10% standard deviation between their size. And then tomorrow, what I'm
Hmm.
doing is I'm testing ethanol on the sensors to see if I can get it to do like 1 ppm, 2 ppm, 0.1 ppm. Like, you know what I mean? Like all of these things, which are very fun and interesting. And like as a
Yes.
doctor, like I feel like there's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of trivialness, if that's the word. But again, being a doctor is extremely rewarding,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But
yeah,
you're chasing the Bunsen bun honeydew life
no,
in
I'm
Beaker,
chasing I'm chasing the
not
beaker
the.
life, man. I'm chasing the beaker life.
Right.
you know.
Dude, I love that. I love Beaker. So
Uh,
so back to so back to so so back so that so back to the army. So the average age. Israeli high school students start getting could potentially start getting notified as to what their service is going to be starting 16 years old, which I think is crazy
Correct.
because my brother-in-law is 16, dude, and my brother is 16, and
Yeah,
I cannot imagine them just being like, well, start doing push-ups because you're going to be in like Secret Service, or because you're going to be in, you're going to be in the front line somewhere, you're going to be, X, Y, and Z checkpoint, um, or intelligence or whatever it is.
for sure.
Um, they're
It,
16,
it's
you know?
different. Yeah, but and it may come off condescending, but you don't live here, so you don't get it
No, it's true. No, 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 of course. And it's a different, but it shows how different of a world it is and how different of a culture it is.
for
But
sure.
it also kind of shows what I think, I think that, necessity breeds
The bare
success.
necessity.
Well, bare necessities, yes. Bare necessities breed success, right? And when you live in a world where you're not fortunate enough to always be secure, and so you have to prepare yourself for the worst at all times.
For
It
sure.
forces you to mature in a different way that you just don't get here, or at least in America, or
But that's the
other
beauty
parts
of
of
America,
the world.
and that's we can get to a
Yeah,
whole
so it's a wonderful thing. So anyway, so then these kids will generally typically ship off to the army, or stay in the army, whatever, be in the army 18 and a half to, or 19 till about 22, 23, 21,
correct.
22, and maybe 23 or 24 even, depending on the student, right?
Right. So those are the quote unquote. You don't call them lifers. There are people who stay on, and those are in the reserves,
Yeah,
and
I have a cousin. I have a cousin who's a lawyer still, and he's in his
yeah,
mid 50s, and he's a lawyer for the like he's for life for Tahal guy, and
yeah.
yeah,
So they have a bunch of those. A lot of them actually are surprisingly are Americans. You have a lot of Americans there. You can
he's
also
English.
or English. You have all these what we call chutznikim, which is not a derogatory term, but sometimes it's derogatory. But it's called
Outsiders.
it's an outsider. It's a we someone who wasn't born here says I'm a chutznik, and some people don't even know the term anymore. It used to be,
Yeah,
I think it used to be used against Taimani people. It's like chutznik, like
Yemenites. Yeah,
Yemenites. Yeah. So basically, it's just yes, your brother is 16, your cousin's 16. The kids you teach in high school are 16. It's a
it's
different
crazy.
mentality. It's something where it's like it's also like it's weird because it's going to war, but the way I see it with Karen's brother-in-laws who are in reserves and go every so often to reserves, it's a necessity. It's like you're protecting your
Yeah, sure.
home.
Yeah.
It's really a crazy concept because even for me, like I go through it almost every day where I see something and I'm just like, why didn't I do the
Yeah,
army?
but we're actually, I think we're at a relatively, I mean, like, this is not this is far from the most common thing that we generally experience. And there are a lot of people that go to the army and they don't see really very much action at all, right? Like, I mean, if it's a relatively quiet couple of years in the country, which, in the last 10, 15 years, there have been a bunch of quiet years, thankfully, you
Right,
know, like, like they don't, they're not experiencing the same thing that what someone's experiencing in this
for
last year.
sure. I've had a lot of friends. Like I think my friend Ezra Tawil. We went to camp with him, and he was in his service, and he literally sat on his tuchus for three
Is what?
years on his tuchus.
I'm just laughing at your word choice. Yeah.
I was wondering because they went blank for a second. I don't know if it was him, but again, like there are people that get to the army and they don't really do much. Like there's a lot of like just like what's the term? And I feel bad because I didn't do the army myself, so I always feel bad saying something like this. But there's a lot of people who just pick up paper clips and put them on the table and then knock them off just to put them back on, and that's their job in the army for 3 years. So there's a lot of positions like that. There needs to be a lot of reform. But to go back to the timeline of
Well,
everything,
I
and
don't
the
know if that's necessarily such a bad thing though. Like that's best case scenario. And you know what? At
right,
a certain point, like you're going through training and you are learning. I think you're learning a lot of what you will need for reserves, and you're getting that kind of like instinct trained within you for
right,
for battle and to know what to do in case something happens. That's
right.
really important.
but I do think that Israel should be a professional army, not a volunteer army. I think it would be very much more where like they'll
It's not
pay.
volunteer.
I mean, you should be volunteer. Like you should be. It should be a volunteer army. You should
Oh,
be.
you don't think it should be mandatory?
I don't think because of the numbers of civilians we have now, and because of the numbers that do go into the army, and from firsthand experiences of people who have claimed that because of the fact that there's this concept in the army that good people leave, bad people stay. Like there's no incentive. Like there needs to be more incentive. There needs to be more things. And I think a professional army, one that is voluntary, would be better for Israel also for on a different level. Because then you also have people choosing, just like in America, people like your grandfather who chose to go to pay for their degrees and they worked for the army and he was the GI for Lady Bird and all these things, which is super cool. You know what I mean? Like there are certain things that I believe, like for the Israeli army to sort of model itself after, like America, because I think that it really would work better. You
I
know,
don't know. I don't know that it would. By the way, I'm going to push back a little bit. I mean, you could tell me. We could like. I want to go through. I think there's going to be really. I think we could have a really great back and forth about this, but because we could do this in this isn't a topic that we're particularly passionate about, just like exchanging thoughts.
yeah,
But I I I think that America has the luxury of being able to have a volunteer army because we're so physically isolated,
right.
um, and geographically isolated from the rest of the world, and we have such an enormous population that we have the luxury of being able to kind of say, well, whoever wants to come. We trust that out of, I mean, how many people live in America? A billion,
No, close to
less.
350 million.
Okay, fine. 350 million. Out of 350 million, we could put together a good amount of volunteers, and there is entire industries towards, and rightfully so, towards, American propaganda, pro American liberties, and, and rights, and as a country. And so, like, okay, you know what? We're isolated. We're not on anyone's doorstep really, except for Mexico, which we have to figure out.
Ah,
Um, and even so, most of the time it's not a problem. But Israel doesn't necessarily have the luxury of size or geographic security. Um, and I also, by the way, think that an enormous part of the Israeli innovation probably comes from the fact that the Israeli teenagers are treated like adults from a younger age, and therefore encouraged to think like adults, act like adults, make things happen by themselves rather than sit around and wait. And while I think America recently has, or in the last, I mean, it's been kind of happening slowly for the last 50 years, but in the last 20 years in particular, we've had delayed adolescence where we we keep on pushing off what it means to be an adult and when you actually feel like you're responsible to do something in your life and the world around you, right? It used to be, and I talked to like my dad when he was 24 was married with a kid and a mortgage, and it wasn't because he was a superhero or anything like that. It's because that's what, like by the time he was 16, 17, his parents were like, listen, you got to start, and they're, obviously a different generation, but they said, listen, you want your own thing, start buying it yourself. You want a family and you want to get married, but tough luck, we're not gonna help you out. You got to do this yourself. And so he had this kind of mentality since he was younger. But for me or for my siblings, my dad would support us for as long as not, I mean, if we could always move back home. We could always live with him forever. He would always, he's always there to help us out and not pressure us or rush us to kind of make decisions as to how to become an adult or when to do so. And you kind of see that on a mass scale. I think the average American thinks, I read a Wall Street Journal article last year or 2 years ago, that the average American thinks that adulthood, like that, what it means to be an adult is like to be like anywhere between 30 and 35.
interesting.
And if you ask an Israeli what the average age of adulthood is, they'd probably say 18, 19,
We could,
maybe 20,
but
21.
that depends on religious level, and that depends on a lot of things. Because you can ask someone in Tel Aviv who's been not religious their whole life, when do they want to settle down and all these things, and the answer is 35. So it depends who you ask. Like you can,
Well, settle down is not the same thing as responsible, though.
I guess.
I bet you have younger. I bet you have younger Israeli business owners, and you have younger Israeli business startups, and you have younger Israeli. Like I think in general, I think you have it, and I think a lot has to do with just this. Hey, listen, you're 16, 17, 18 years old. You're an adult, and you have a country to protect, and you have a family to protect, and you have to be responsible. And then I think implementing that kind of mentality at such a young age is so important.
Right. I mean, again, it's just I don't disagree with you at all. I just think it's sort of hard on this topic in general because again, there is a lot of data that shows that is done by Israeli professors in every university here that we could survive off of a professional army, and it might even be better because if you give good conditions and you give salaries that are similar to high tech in Israel, and you give incentives, and yeah, your first 3 years are gonna suck and be terrible, like it's sort of just like sort of it could work. And yes, we don't have the luxury of an ocean separating us or anything of the sort, but we do have the luxury of technology
You have
and
a leaky
people.
faucet separating you.
Right, which is always a fun thing. But my
Hmm.
point with that is that like if you told someone who's getting bad grades at the age of 16, hey, let's put you through the system, go to the army, and like this is the same thing that like someone told you. If someone told you in America, hey, you don't have good grades, maybe go to the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps will help you get into college and pay for college and they'll help you be a good student, make you more
Yeah, but
disciplined.
we also know that's not true in America.
It's not,
America does not help their
no,
veterans
but
win
it's
as
not
much as they
veterans.
say.
First of all, the GI Bill is still there, so that's the first thing. But the second thing is that let's step away from America in a second, where you come to a socialized country which does take care of their veterans and does take care of the people that come out of the army. Karen's father was injured in the army, and he still gets benefits, and he's 60.
That's awesome.
So they still
That's
here
awesome.
they do take care of it. So if we're going to distinguish these things, you have to be very particular on what you pick. Yes, America does not take their veterans. I feel like seriously is not a good term. They don't take care of them. Period.
No, they don't. They don't take. They're not as efficient as taking care of him as we would like.
Right.
I think is what it is.
That's
Because
the term.
it's not that the programs aren't in place, and it's not that the budget isn't there. It's just that the actual implementation of it is very difficult to do. I
For
think.
sure. And whatever the reason is, if it's that, if it's something else, or three other things. The point is that in Israel, yes, Israel is a socialized country, so I do believe that these are the things. Like my old roommate had a friend who came over who's literally getting out of the army, and he's going to be, I think, 41, and he's pension. And
Right.
people who are lifers, just the way they do it in the police corps, just the way they do it in the firefighters, and all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
it's very similar. But
Sure.
at least in Israel, to the best of my knowledge, it works pretty damn well. So having these incentives in
Wait. So
place.
yeah. So I'm sorry. I wanna just. I'm asking you to clarify now. I'm not. I want you to continue
Go for
talking.
it.
But what is? Why is? What is that? I agree with everything you're saying. What does that have to do with taking a mandatory draft and making it voluntary? Like, how would that change? Like if they're doing a good job with this right now at the moment, then why would changing it up make it better?
It's just to get rid of jobs that are unnecessary. It's really to
Trim off
It's
fat,
trim off
trim the
fat.
fat
It's
off.
also to make it not even just lean in a sense, but it's to trim off fat to build muscle. Like Israel has the ability with technology and the brains that we have. Like if you look around, Israel I think has more Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, in biology, in sciences, in engineering than
Right.
all of our Middle Eastern neighbors. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, a lot of
Right.
the labs are talking to the Ministry of Defense all the time. If you have these professionals,
Right.
like again, like someone like me who came to Israel, I guess my point is that I don't want to I want to volunteer, but I want to be able to do something that's worthwhile. When I came to Israel and I was like, I went to go speak to them and I was like, I want to volunteer. They're like, okay, what can you do? I'm like, I have a degree in chemistry, I have a degree in biochemistry, I want to do my doctorate in biotechnology and in food sciences. They're like, okay, so you want to be a secretary? I said, what? Like, and that's the problem with the army is like you have all these things, and like I also look at wartime. You have the spokesperson unit. You have all these units, and you have all these things that need a fresh face or a fresh idea with English speakers. But the thing is, you have this chutznik mentality, this outsider mentality
Right.
coming in. And if you're not born here, people also look back to Golda Meir, where they blame her for who was the fourth prime minister of Israel, if I'm not mistaken. And they blame her for the Yom Kippur War in 1976, and they blame her for all the deaths and all the things and whatever. And they're like, oh, one of the reasons is because she wasn't fully Israeli. And I'm like, okay,
Wait, so okay, yeah, well, that doesn't really sound very reasonable to me.
welcome to
But
Israel.
yeah, but so I understand point A. I understand point B. I don't know that implementing point B will impact point A. Meaning, it doesn't sound like it's a problem with forcing people to go to the army. It sounds like once people are in the army, the way that the army is effectively run is not as efficient as it
For
could be.
sure.
And by the way, very few, nothing is run as efficient as it could be. You know,
Correct.
that's why we live in a world that's progressed. You know, that's always progressing and changing and developing.
Right.
So, like, yeah, of course, but but I don't understand. I don't entirely understand, at least, like. Okay, so you get a volunteer, and so you say, you know what, my name's Charles Krul. I want to volunteer for the biology unit in the army.
Hmm.
Just or I want to do biodefense or something like that,
Right.
right? And now, just because you're volunteering, doesn't mean they're going to take you, regardless of whether it's a mandatory or voluntary draft. Like they don't like they just not every volunteer is taking everything that what they're willing to
Right. Face
volunteer
value.
for.
No, for
That's
sure.
number one, right? So that already does not, and if the stigma of being an outsider exists now, I can't imagine that making it a volunteer system would make that stigma magically go away.
For sure.
Really,
I don't know if there's a correct solution.
um,
I'm not really sure what the solution is. I just think, listen, there's things because Israel is a socialized country. It has what is it? Socialized. It's socialist views, capitalist outlook. I think is the way they say it because we do have free market trade like
what
America.
else in Israel is socialized? What else in Israel is socialized other than the medicine? Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know much about this.
So medicine is one, but you have to look at it as an umbrella term of socialism. Israel is a socialist country based on a few things: the way that it's taxed, the way that it spends its tax money, the way that it also. I am far from an expert on this, but from my understanding, is that your
Yeah.
social benefits that come from the government make it a socialized country. So the benefits I get, which is global or what is it, global healthcare or whatever it's called, um, uh,
Yeah. Sure.
as well as
Universal healthcare.
universal healthcare, which is a huge umbrella term. Like let's say God forbid someone goes in for a surgery, it costs like 4 shekels, which is the equivalent of $1.
Right.
Someone has, God forbid, someone has cancer. They go in for chemotherapy. Chemotherapy costs in America, I don't know, $8,000 a treatment. Here it costs 15
Yeah.
shekel, the equivalent of $5. So that's like
Yeah. Well, because you're paying 50% taxes the entire time,
not
right?
everyone. It depends what you do. So I won't say how much I'm paying in taxes, but there's brackets. But a lot of it goes to
Right.
so what are the social benefits? So you get social benefits based on everyone gets pension, everyone gets unemployment if you're working, obviously. If you're paying taxes, this is what you get. So that's what it is to be a modern socialized country.
Does America not have that? I mean, other than medicine, but
No,
America has
because
certain
it's
things
because
that.
America gives it A to the state, B to the employer, and C, it also depends on the person working. So this is a lot of the reason why a lot of places in America do. So when you have a part-time job in America, you don't have a 401k or dental or anything. You don't have medicine.
Right, right. That's why the big corporations or big companies that you work for will provide for you health insurance or
Exactly.
401k match or whatever, because they're essentially doing what the Israeli government does for for all its people that your employer is doing for you.
Right, exactly. So Israel, so universal
Interesting.
income, not universal income, but universal healthcare and social benefits. Like there are food stamps, there are
Pensions and stuff.
there are pensions, there are things like that. Like families that need tax help, there are tax breaks for families with X amount of kids. You get a tax break for every kid. You get half a point. You
But we have that with America too.
right. But I'm saying like this is under the umbrella of socialism in Israel.
Right. Right, right,
You
right.
know, yes,
Cool.
you do pay,
Okay.
if you make over 40,000 shekel a month, you do pay 48% in taxes. You know, like
Philosophically, philosophically, how far is socialism from communism or capitalism? Which one is it closer to?
they're on the ends of, it's sort of like the question of like how far is Russia from America? Like they're at the ends of the spectrum of the circle where they're almost touching,
What does that mean?
meaning that they're far enough that they're close enough.
Does Israel does the government structure of this socialized world, is it more similar to what Russia or China would have, or is it more similar to what America or
It's
you
definitely
know
more similar to America. It's 100% more similar to America. And this is because we do have the free markets, right? We do have the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. We do have free markets. We do have the ability to move money anywhere. We do have the ability to import, export. We do have the money to tax. We do have we have all these things that America has that say that China, and like we do have like these freedoms. You know, we like
right,
China as being a communist country does not allow certain companies. Like China doesn't have Google or Facebook or Twitter or any of these things, I think,
right,
and that's because they control everything because
or
it's
very
right.
filtered
So
versions, right?
you can only have X, Y, or Z, but in Israel, it's still. That's why I said in the beginning, like we're a socialist country, but we're fiscally capitalists or in
Right,
capitalism,
right,
using capitalism.
right, 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 right.
We're a very weird
Yeah,
country.
it's cool. No, it's cool, but you know what? First of all, it's young, which is very which I think is really really important for context. That it's 70 years old, and like you're allowed to take time to figure yourself out. You know,
Right.
I mean, you're essentially, you're an adolescent in terms of your governance and like the way that you operate.
For
And
sure.
I mean, everyone always talks about how Israeli politics is such a shit show, and it is from my I mean, from my very limited understanding. But you got to give it time to balance itself out and even its way out. And the problem really is that and this is one of the Jordan Peterson quotes that I love the most. Don't compare yourself to who someone else is today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. You know, you can't compare Israel, who's 70 years old, can't compare them, or 75 years old, can't compare itself to America, who's been around for a couple hundred years. You know, and for to Italy or to England or whatever, because like you're 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 a child compared to them. You know, in terms of your age and the amount of
Right.
time you have to figure some things out.
Right, but I will say that we do have better GDP than some of those countries. You know,
Sure, sure. By the way, my point is not to compare. My point is, like, I mean, just like any kid out there, right? If my son is more adept at, expressing himself than he is at walking or talking, you know, like that's a strength that he has that I can know, okay, this is one of your strengths, we can capitalize on it. And also, I can't worry too much about the fact that you're not as, if he's talking, let's say full sentences now, which he's not, but let's say he was, and it's considered early for a kid, but he's not walking yet. Like, listen, he's growing at his pace and he has his natural strengths and he has the things that he has to work on. Israel's GDP might be a natural strength, but the politics might need something to work on.
right,
And again, and it's not to compare Israel's GDP to Australia's or New Zealand's or anyone's. It's to say it's compare it to yourself and say, well,
right,
how were you last year? How was the last election cycle? Is this better than that? How is this prime minister compared to the first prime minister?
right,
Are they better or worse? What's it like? And not to say how does America's political landscape similar to America's or similar to England's or Mexico's, because
for
like
sure.
it's not America, it's not Mexico, it's not Canada, it's itself.
No, one hundred
And I
percent.
think it's a really I think we have to be fair with we have to treat everyone like that, not just Israel, but ourselves, everyone, like we have to compare ourselves to ourselves, and then if you do it well, that's when you become a role model,
Right.
you know.
No, I definitely agree. Like, I think that it's a very interesting way of thinking of it, and I don't. We always compare Israel to other countries when Israel has its own problems that are not similar, are similar, and all these things. But yeah, it's sort of like the Einsteinian quote, like you can't teach a fish how to climb a tree. Like one of
Hmm.
those things. Like you're using the wrong
And a fish is
yardstick.
not. And a fish is not. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. You have to pick your yardsticks, and you have to know what the appropriate one is. I also like. I also love the notion that the best leaders are not the ones that that want to be leaders, but the ones that don't want to be and are pushed into that position. And like, and the second that you turn into an entity that wants to be a leader is the second that you have to lose your right to be it, because at that point there's something else other than excellence and other than passion and other than enthusiasm and that kind of singular motivation. There's other factors that are detrimental to your ability to lead and everyone else's ability to listen.
Yeah.
And the second that America, for example, decided to become the world's police is the second that we stopped winning every war. Like what? How did that happen? I thought everyone looked up to us.
Right.
Like yeah, they looked up to us. They looked up to us for just being ourselves the best we could be. And the second that we wanted the spotlight, and the second we wanted everyone to look at us like we're the best, that's when we kind of started tumbling a little bit.
No, for sure. But that's also the reason why like I like what Donald Trump Jr. said, or whatever his son's name said. He said there's no reason why he has to be here. There's no reason why he has to be the president. There's no reason. He's done everything. He's accomplished. He can go retire. He can do
Right.
whatever he wants. But he loves the country. He wants to make sure that we
Right.
stay the best country in the world. And it's that passion that really
Hmm.
attracts people. And yes, he might not be the best person on the planet. And yes, he might be.
Yeah.
The,
By the way, even if he is not even the best option for a president, I think that it's funny. I really I was not a big fan by any stretch of the imagination for a long time. Um, But what he's done, which is so smart, and what's been brought to light, is that he's not running. He's not making this a Republican Democrat election. He's making this a establishment versus anti-establishment election.
right.
And that was the beauty of bringing RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk into the whole
Mix.
party and campaign and the whole crew into the mix, is because these are lifelong Democrats. These are lifelong liberals, and what they all have in common is that they tried expressing their individuality and wanting to be themselves against what an establishment narrative was.
Yeah.
And then the establishment came after them and they said, you know what, it's too much, and the establishment has too much power. So I don't feel like this is election. I don't feel like this election or Donald Trump even anymore. To me, he does not represent Donald Trump anymore. To me, he represents anti-establishment and trying to get things right and give individuality back to the people than it is left or right.
Right.
Because I wouldn't vote for him as a Republican. I wouldn't vote for him as as the best potential president. Like
Right.
that's not he's not that option. But he is the only option to be anti-establishment. And that to me is a far more important thing than just left or right.
100%. My favorite thing that I saw recently is sort of exactly to that fact where it's like for the past 25 years, 21 of them have been held by a Democrat, and they're blaming Trump for the 4 years that he's been in.
No, it's not 2025. By the way, you're wrong. It's 12 and 4.
It's 12 and
But
4.
the
You
line
saw it
because
also, or whatever
yeah,
it
well,
was?
think about it. Yeah. Because think
No,
about
you.
it. Bush was president in the 2000s,
Right.
right? So starting from 2008 to 2024, there's been one Republican president in office.
From 2008 to
Right.
2024, there's only been one. Right.
Because you have Obama 2008 to 12, and then 12 to 16. Trump 16 to 20, and Biden 20 to
No,
24.
100% correct.
So So that's what it is. It's out of the last almost 2 decades, a decade and a half. You've had four Democrats in it, but it's not a matter of Democrat. But what your point is, which I don't even think you meant to say, but is even more correct, is out of the last 20 years, only one of them didn't have a active war
Right.
in the under their and war, especially a war that's not happening on American turf that America doesn't necessarily have to be involved in. War is the big is almost representative of the big establishment versus what's best for the people, and the money that you send to war versus the money you spend to take care of your people. that really it becomes the question, and that really becomes the point of contention. So it doesn't make a difference that Bush was on the right or whether he'd be on the left. It has to do with were American troops being deployed? How much money were we spending on
Right.
wars versus in the country? How much of our budget was going to American problems as opposed to foreign
Right.
problems? And that goes way more than the last 12 years, 14 years. That goes to for the last 25, 30 years.
Right. 100%. I think that is just very interesting. And like what to continue on this, what I was going to say with it as well is that every speech that Kamala Harris is making, she's like, day one, we're gonna do this. Day one, we're gonna do this. But like, where have you been for the past 4 years?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I think enough people have been saying these kind of things. I don't really know what I think of her, and I've actually been hearing two ends of the spectrum that she's either a lot dumber than people think or a lot smarter than people think, and that she's not really dumb by any stretch of the imagination, and that it's kind of a show that she's putting on. Um, and what she's really leaned into, which I actually think has been really her probably chief strategy and probably most what we essentially have is right now like almost everything, it's a publicity battle,
For sure.
right? And so you need a face, you need something that people could quickly associate you with, right?
Right.
That's the way that people work. Most people don't do homework. Most people don't spend time for an extended period of time looking into things. They kind of get information, and especially today, whether it be, and it's so funny because on podcasts, people say, "Oh, well, now you have more long-term content than ever," and it's true. We do have a ton of long-form content, but most people are consuming it in 2-minute clips on Twitter that these Twitter journalists or
Hmm.
Instagrammers or whatever it is are posting in 2 minutes, that they are manipulating these 3-4 hour conversations
Right.
in the same way that a news channel would, which is to just give you a 2-minute segment, right?
Right.
So I'll watch, and it's funny because I've watched Rogan episodes, I've watched, Lex Friedman episodes, and then I'll go into and I'll listen to 2, 3, 4 hours of it, and then I'll go back on Twitter, and then I'll see a 2-minute clip, and like this guy literally just manipulated the entire conversation to make a point based on like what his or her historical, you know, leaning was,
Right.
right? So I was like, we're still being bombarded with short clips that really aren't thoughtful or thought out, right? They're kind of just pushing us one way or another, and so you have certain things that you represent. Trump represents fighting establishment, and and really, by the way, to like completely objectively, like fighting against a system that seems to be corrupt, and picking and choosing their standards depending on who they're talking to and dealing with, and to
Right.
fight against that. And that's what people like. So Kamala Harris needs something that that she needs a face that people can associate, or like something like that pops into people's head with her. And right now, it's like the funny, easygoing, carefree. We'll figure everything out, and everything is good as long as the bad guys don't get in. But like, look how easygoing and fun life is. Look how enjoyable things are, and she laughs at everyone, and she's likable, and she has a lot of contagious energy. And
Right.
I mean, laughter is a really powerful tool, and weapon. Laughter is something that disarms people. Laughter is something that is, yeah, that it's attractive and it's magnetic and it's contagious. And people that laugh can kind of distract you from almost anything else. And I think that it's a tool that can be used in a really unique way. And I think that she's really getting behind that, like full on. Like
Weaponizing it.
I don't think. Yeah, well, she's implementing it. We'll call it implementing. I don't
Fine.
want to say weaponize, because weaponize
It's
implies that
not
like you're
come
using
together,
it to like
dude.
attack something. It's not come together, but it also implies that you're attacking. And I don't know that she's necessarily doing this as an attack on people as much as she's doing this to persuade people,
Right.
right? This Friday night, I was at a meal with someone, and there's this girl there, and she's the most um, she comes from stereotypical Florida Christian family out there, right? Her dad's a cop. He's gonna be retiring soon. Her mom's a Bible studies teacher and engineer, and they're hardcore Christians, and they're faithful and devout, and a thousand bajillion percent over the top, right?
Okay.
Like they don't let her like she's 22, 23. They don't let her out of the house without tracking her phone. They don't let her hang out with friends that know exactly who their friends are, exactly where she's going, exactly what time. Like they'll demand proof. Like if she tells them go out to hang out with my friend, she's like, show me. They're like, show me proof you made plans with this friend, and that you're not just disappearing
Wow.
somewhere, right? Which is really, really, really
It's a
crazy, and I really
lot.
feel terrible for this girl. And I noticed that when I met her, she had a disposition to just laugh and giggle a lot, right? Just and like and again, and so I meet her, and I get to know her for an hour and a half, 2 hours at this meal at this table. We're all drinking, we're having a good time, we're eating, and as I'm finding out more and more about what her parents' relationship with her parents, I'm like, I look at her and I'm like completely serious. I'm like, are you okay? Like, are you okay?
Huh.
And she laughs, like completely like laughs, like, and it's a very, lively laugh. It really has a lot of enthusiasm. And she laughs and she laughs. She goes, no, I'm so not okay. It's so not
Oh
okay.
my God.
And, but, and like, and I was able to, and at that moment, in that second, I was like, whoa, like this show, like, I didn't realize how powerful a laughter as a defense mechanism, as a tool, as a way to disarm people, as a way to protect yourself. I
Right.
didn't realize how good of a weapon that was, sorry, not a weapon, a tool as that is, because she she's obviously a very, very hurt and scared and traumatized individual. And she comes across, and even when she's saying these crazy things and she's laughing while she's saying it, you're like, oh, it's not so bad. And then you stop and you're like, but if she's not laughing, like, and she's saying this, you're like, shit, this girl needs some therapy, like, now,
Yeah.
like, this girl needs to get out of her house, like,
Pronto.
now, and yeah, but she's laughing the whole time. And so you almost don't even, like, expect it. And I think that when Harris creates this persona, it disarms so many people that are seeing short bursts and clips of her and short, captions and short videos and short segments of her, that it distracts from, what she actually, that if they did 5 more minutes of homework or 10 more minutes of homework, or actually listen to the words that were coming out of her mouth rather than reading her disposition and her body language,
Right.
I think that there'd be that I think that people would feel very differently. And I don't think a lot of people, obviously, I mean, I don't believe the polls. I
No.
think that polls are probably an outdated and not accurate way of kind of gauging, whether, how accurate things are. And I actually think that probably the best way to tell the way that people think is by how many people are consuming what forms of media and what the values of that media are, right? So, for example, let's say Fox News has a poll. They say 60% of people are voting for Trump, and then and 40% are voting for Harris, and then and CNN comes out and says, well, it's like closer to 50-50, but whatever. And then you look at the actual numbers of the people that are consuming these mediums, and you find out they're all above the average is above the age, I think, of 65, almost 70 at this point,
Right.
right? And then you find out that they get 300,000 viewers or 250,000 viewers per night. And then you go to Lex Friedman, you see that his interview with Trump has 4 million views, and you're like, and skewing from the age of 18 to 45, right? And you're like, well, you have exponentially more people, that are listening to this conversation, and you have exponentially more people that are going to be of I won't even say obviously voting age, but of that are more participatory in their world,
Right.
right, as opposed to a 65 or 75-year-old, and they're consuming this media. And so forget about what the poll says. Look at what the people are actually listening to and engaging in, and then you could say, well, I didn't notice that. I noticed that Lex Friedman keeps on trying to get Harris or Tim Waltz or whoever on the podcast, and none of them are joining. And So they're missing out on this enormous viewer base. If you have someone that has opportunity to go and like everyone knows that when Joe Rogan has people on, he either has his friends because he likes talking to them, or he has someone that he's interested in talking to because he wants to learn more about what they're doing and he's interested in their train of thought, or people come on that treat it like a presentation, and they bring slides and they prepare for months and they get ready and they have their books that they're bringing and they have all these slides that they're showing and they're making a real presentation because they know that the audience is going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 times bigger than the people that if they went on a local news channel or even a what do you call it, even a countrywide news channel like Fox or CNN or MSNBC.
Right.
So the polls, I think, are so far from accurate, but they're I think polls are a tool that are being used to try to convince people that more people think a certain way than not, because they're coming from a quote unquote place of authority, you know.
I completely agree. I wanted to ask you sort of a on-topic question, but do you think voting will ever end up being on one of these platforms rather than at the polls themselves?
Interesting. You mean for polls or for voting, like for
Both,
voting, like on election day?
literally both. Because if you think about it, based on what you just said, like you get the real like take Facebook. Let's take out let's jump back.
I think it will happen. I think it will happen, but I think what's going to have to happen is that there's going to have to be right now. I think in the year 2024, we're essentially at a tipping point where we're at the point that people are starting to say, I don't think that these establishments are as good of an authority as they once were, as we had treated them in the past, right?
Right.
So I think that we're starting to get there. I think that once the trust is completely gone, and once people really, really stop listening, and once the 65 to 70 age, really, I mean, I don't want to say die out, but become as time goes on, and less people consume it, then you're not going to really have it. Like you're not going to have a choice but to find another measure of polling or another standard of polling because
100%.
you know what I'm saying? Like right now, I think it's the only. I think it's the furthest that it's ever been from accurate, and I think it's only going to get further. And then when that happens, you'll probably have polls done on social media. I
Hmm.
don't think you're going to have actual like elections and stuff like that done unless elections have proven themselves to be so not accurate
I mean, it's also the question of how
that you
many
have to
people are
take like a.
voting at the end of the day. Like, if I remember there was like a number that was nuts that like only 50% of the population are voting, like, or something crazy like that. I forget the number and I forget where I saw it, but I think it was post 2020. It was something like only 50, not even because it was
Yeah,
Corona.
because we've been less happy with our options than ever before.
Right. Listen, I have no idea. This election sort of makes me like crazy because it's just like, I give Kamala Harris a lot of credit because she was the district attorney, I think, of New York or Chicago. Like she has a resume, but it's so funny how like you just everything that you said also with her just smiling and like basically she's like that dog in that firehouse saying like everything's fine. You know what I mean? So she's just like
Hmm.
sort of smiling, but
Hmm.
it's like really sad because like you see all these videos and like the short form.
Oh, that meme, you
Yeah,
mean?
that meme. And like it's just sort of sad
Yeah.
because like she's actually a very accomplished politician. It's like a lot of people don't even know that she was a district attorney. A lot of people don't even know where she
Right.
went for college. A lot of people don't even know
Yeah,
where
but
she's
then the people
from.
that but, the, but then the people that know that she's a district attorney like her even less after
Well, I mean,
that,
that's why I also like her
because
even
they
less.
right because you know what she did as a district attorney.
Right, exactly. And like I know what she says and I know what she stands for. And I know that like again, like as much as she's like Israel's are like listen, I vote for basically three things. Taxes, Israel, and Israel. Like again, like
Right.
everyone votes for their own personal gain. Again, that's why
And self-interest. Right.
right, that's why my dad and I agree with him completely. That's why I think that city council, mayor, governor, senate, Congress, it's very important to go vote. I think that voting for president is important, but I think it's more important that you know who's the mayor.
And local elections are way more
Yeah,
important. Yes, local elections make the day-to-day difference.
this is also like not even to get into it in any realm. But Roe versus Wade, like all Trump did was take it away from the federal government and say the
Yeah, put it
states
back to the
get to
states.
decide. And
Yeah,
and if you say that to someone, they'll be like, that doesn't sound half bad. Because again, it
right.
sounds bad if you're in a state and yes, you don't follow the views and you can jump. It gets a little bit like Stalin like, where it's like you can't jump a border to get an abortion. Like I'm very much you and I are the same. Like Joe Rogan always says, like let drugs be legal as long as you don't hurt someone. Do whatever the hell you want. Like listen, if you are
Right.
someone who wants to get an abortion and yeah, listen for as religious Jews, maybe that's not for us, but as someone else, like fine.
Right, exactly.
Like,
I tried actually put I asked that question to my students last year. I said I was because I was very curious to hear what like I guess I guess they are biased, but undeveloped and kind of naive perspective
mhm.
would be on this. I was like, what? I was like, how many people here are pro or anti-abortion? And whatever amount raised their hands or didn't. And and I said, now, how many of you are so confident in your perspective that you feel that you should be able to tell other people that they should be able to do what they want to do or not? And that led to a whole nother conversation, which was it's not about what you would do personally, but it's about whether you feel so strongly about this that you think that it's something so important that other people should listen to
Yep.
to what you think too. And that number changed dramatically, and there were a couple of kids that said, listen, at the end of the day, if you really do believe that this is what it is, and if you're really against it for the reason that you say you're against it, then you should be against it for everyone. Like, just if you say, like, listen, I'm not gonna rob someone, and like, but that doesn't mean that someone else shouldn't be allowed to rob someone. Like, no, like we
Right.
believe that in order to live in a functioning society, and then you kind of get more into nuance as to, okay, well, so what would make it, and that is a pendulum that's always going back and forth. It's always swaying. That our understanding is always changing, our perspective is always
For
changing. That's
sure.
fine, but so I think there's certain things that we agree as a society is a societal. It's not just my business; it's everyone's business. Drunk driving is everyone's business. Why? Because you can kill someone else when you're drunk driving.
100%.
And and you're impacting someone else,
This
and you're
is
hurt, and you're destroying another family.
for sure, and this has always been my thing, sort of to like take it a little bit on like a fork or a tangent, but this has always been my problem with Judaism until I realized that I'm an adult and can do whatever I want. Sort of the same thing with politics, where
Right.
it's like I don't love when someone tells me to go to synagogue. I don't. I hate it. I like to do things on my own fruition. I actually had this conversation with your mom actually a few days ago, where it's always been hard for me to go to synagogue as a religious Jew. I still do not. I'm not going to say hate. I still do not like to go, but I know it's good to go, community and everything like that. On the same token, it's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm never going to force, and this is something very interesting, as like being in a long-term relationship, you have your own, you have a son, and a wife, like it's all these things that I always think about is like, where do I push and where do I not push? And then it's like even yesterday, like I
Yeah.
was sitting with Karen eating dinner and I didn't have bread with my dinner and she did. And I looked at her and I was like, oh, do you want to wash? And I was just like, hold up. Why did you say that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
not, it's not, and the word is, it's not my commandment. It's not,
Yeah. So I want to push back for just the tiniest bit
go for it.
and say that washing might not be a quote unquote big deal, but I do think that if you're going to join, and I actually felt this way very strongly about, let's say, masks and COVID, right?
Hmm.
I didn't particularly care to wear a mask. I wasn't particularly afraid of COVID. I had it a couple of times, and at the beginning I was. At the beginning I was much more vigilant. But
Right.
what I did really believe, and what I did actually preach to all my friends, and I got called names actually because of it, but I don't really care, was it's like, listen, if you go into an establishment, you go to a restaurant or a bar or a bookshop or whatever it is that says, please wear a mask, and you walk in and you're not wearing one, I was like, this is a voluntary exchange that you're initiating in, right?
Right.
You don't have to be in this particular bookshop. You don't have to be in this particular coffee shop. You don't have to be in this particular bar. And now that you're going to someone else's private establishment, there's going to be a agreed upon set of rules that in order for you to join to partake in this voluntary transaction or this voluntary relationship, then you guys should be on the same page as to what the terms that you guys are going to, engage, what the way that you're going to behave is, right? So I was like, I don't, whether you agree with masks or not, if I walk into someone, or or if let's say I don't want my kid listening to rap music, right, at 2 years old,
For
and
sure.
like you're free to do whatever you want, but if you're going to voluntarily engage in a relationship with me, I don't have to participate in that, and I don't have to hear your music. Just like I don't have to walk into your shop and wear a mask. I go to a shop that doesn't care whether I wear a mask. And so when you're going to be dating someone and part of your, or, marrying someone, and you're spending a life with someone, and part of your relationship is by definition pretty voluntary, right? Like no
Right.
one's forcing you guys to date, and no one's forcing you guys to get married. There's nothing wrong with having established terms as to what you guys consider to be values in a life that you're pursuing, you know?
Right.
So on one hand, she doesn't. You don't have to tell her to obey. A
Obey.
list of. It's a list, yeah, a list of Jewish traditions and rules. But there's nothing. But because it's voluntary, there's also nothing. Like you could say, listen, if you don't want to wash, or you don't want to keep Shabbat, or you don't want to keep kosher or anything like that, you don't have to. But that doesn't mean that you have to. But it doesn't mean that I have to compromise on that too. And I want my partner to be on the same page as me. So I think that so I think that this whole I almost call I kind of look at it almost like libertarian in terms of, but with relationships, right? I think that I think that when you're engaging in something voluntary, it is important to have standards and a yardstick as to what the way that you live is going to look like, and the way that you treat each other is going to look like.
Right.
And it's not just, oh, you do you, I do me, because you guys are in a relationship and you guys are building a life together, and so you should be on the same page about a lot of things. And this might not be a fight that you think is worth to partaking in. This may not be a battle that you want to pick, and that's okay. But there should still be, like, it doesn't have to just be you do you and I do me.
Well, no, so that isn't what I'm saying. What I am saying is, like, in connecting it to politics and Judaism and all these things, like the idea is respect. Like something again that I learned from your mom is like, I brought it up with Mayor that I like went at Mayor. We were like 16, and I went at Mayor for his black hat and all these things, and like now I'm just like looking at it, and I look at someone, I'm like, wow, he does all these. It's respect. It's like that mutual respect, and like that's the thing also where it's like the way I grew up, where my dad would wake me up and ruin my hair and take away my pillow and all these things and yada yada yada. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
there's learning and there's education and there's the wrong way to do it, right? Because it's also understanding the personality of the person. Like what I did to Karen yesterday and saying, oh, do you want to wash? Do you want to go wash your hands for bread and do a blessing? And she sat there and was like, I'm okay. And like, it's not because she's not
right,
religious. It's not because she's not anything. It's because she's just not going to do it. And I shouldn't blame her or say anything bad about it or
right,
anything.
right, right. Of
And it's
course.
sort of the same thing with the way I feel about politics. It's like, I have a friend named Abby who is a heavy, 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 heavy liberal. But again,
Hmm.
she has no problem that I vote for Trump, and I have no problem that she votes for Biden or Kamala. I don't know who she's voting for now. But again, like all of these things, it's just like there's this mutual respect, and this is what I think also like this come together idea where I think we've lost it in America
Yeah,
in America and in Israel in all these places where it's like
yeah,
if you're this way, screw you, fuck off. This is not the way you should be.
yeah.
Versus the way that it should be is like this is why also I like Chabad in a lot of senses. Chabad has a good idea going where it's
Hmm.
like you are this way,
Yeah.
come to my home, let me show you
strip
something.
away strip away all the shit, and let's find the common denominator that keeps us
For
together.
sure,
That's what they're the best at.
a
They're
hundred percent.
so good at that.
And it's sort of sad because it's like when these things happen and like you see such divide, like listen, go protest, go do what you want in America, in Israel, and all these things. Like realize that we all do have the same values. Realize that we do all want to come together at the end of the day and have a July 4th barbecue. You know what I mean? I want to have this. I want to go see Joey Chestnut slobber down 60 different hot dogs. You know what I mean?
83.
83. Oh, so sorry. But
Dude, because the loser hit 68.
the loser is
Crazy.
68. I think I ate 68 hot dogs in
Yeah,
2 years. Like, holy moly.
dude, you don't eat 60. You haven't ate 60 hot dogs in your life, I bet.
I like hot dogs.
How long you're almost 30. I guess that means you have two hot dogs a year. No. So, but you're probably in the last decade.
No,
I bet in the last 10 years you
I've
haven't
hit.
eaten 70 hot
Dude,
dogs.
every week in the Kroll household, we had like hot dogs like once a week, dude.
Oh, when you were growing up, really?
Yeah. I still love hot dogs now, dude. A pack of hot dogs in Israel
I
has
love
like
hot dogs.
18 hot dogs in them, and Karen does not eat hot dogs, so
Dude, I have a friend that eats hot dogs 3 times a week.
that's a little much. Don't say who it is.
He loves it. He loves it. It's so funny.
Dude,
And it's actually funny because I went to his house. I went to his house the other night,
I think I
and
now have an idea who it is.
we participated in a group marijuana session,
Ah,
and afterwards, so we're sitting and watching football, or hanging out, and he goes, "I'm going to get a hot dog. Do you want one?" I'm like, and I'm torn because I know that I don't want one because I really do care about what I'm putting into my body, and I really do care about the way that I treat
but
myself, and
think
I
about
also
your
know that
hero. But think about your hero, Joey Chestnut.
exactly. I have to think about my hero, but I said no, and then the next morning I texted him, and I was like, dude, I was like, everyone always says like you'll never regret making the right choice. Like I kind of regret not eating a hot dog last night. Like I kind of regret not having one. Like
I love
I don't
it.
know how I don't know how principled I should have been about that because I love I love a plain hot dog with a little bit of mustard, no
Mm.
ketchup, and like I don't even need a toasted bun. I just need like one of those regular soft buns that
Yes,
like it's like a pillow, like you bite into like a
fresh.
pillow and you have the yeah. And he happens to grill his hot dogs with barbecue sauce on it.
Love it.
And dude, I love he came over one time, we made it was actually really cool. You should try this out because even if you don't like so spicy, when you cook it, a lot of the spice goes out. But he brought jalapenos and hot dogs,
Mm.
and then he cut the jalapenos in a way that you were able to wrap them around the hot
Oh
dogs, right?
wow,
So he didn't cut it. He kind of carved it almost, so it made like a swirl
got
around the hot
it.
dog, and then we grilled the hot dog with the
I
jalapeno,
like that a lot.
and then we ate it at we I think we had one of them in a bun and one of them by itself, and it was so good. It was so good.
Dude, those are
Um,
dirty dogs.
hmm Yeah,
Does
yeah,
Miami still
definitely.
have the free promo? The
Doghouse?
doghouse?
I don't know. I don't go out to eat very often, and I certainly don't go to Miami to eat
It's
because
expensive.
it's 45 minutes to an hour, and then there's a lot of restaurants here or within an hour driving distance that are just better. That I wouldn't necessarily have to go there. Do we really? We probably went there
We
once,
went
right? It
there once. I think we were 18. No.
was off of 41st Street,
Yeah. You know, oh my God, I found someone lives on Pine. I'm not gonna say
Pine Tree.
on Pine Tree, and I forget someone famous, and I'm like, oh my God, like your grandfather also lives there.
Yeah, of course.
I forgot
Yeah,
who it
Pine
was.
Trees. Pine Trees. So first of all, it's a huge block. It's
Yeah,
like it goes for a very
it's like
long way,
five
but it's also
miles.
yeah. I mean, but my grandfather's been living on Pine Tree since I think the 80s or even earlier.
No, I think
So I
this.
mean, he bought it.
Yeah.
He bought it when it was nothing, and now it kind of built up. I actually came across a book that I wanted to read. I didn't buy it because it was a fortune in the bookshop that I was at, but it was literally just about the year 19 I think 80 in South Florida, and that year in particular there was an enormous rise in crime from the Cubans and a lot of South America sending just like emptying their prisons and sending them all to
Oh wow.
America. Um, and that's the premise of the movie Scarface, and like that was based on like true historical events. So there were like gangs and drug fights and gunfights that were happening all the time. And my grandfather at the time, who was a young doctor with a young family, generally speaking, you don't use electronics, or you don't drive, you don't do a lot of these things on Shabbos, and unless it's considered dangerous. And the rabbi of the shul told everyone that if you're walking to and from, first of all, I think you may have even been allowed to drive at that point if you live far enough that it was unsafe to walk at night.
Right.
And if you wanted to drive, you could drive. And then if not, if you're going to walk, certainly, if you're walking, you should be, you should, you not only are you allowed, but you should bring a gun with you. Um,
Wow.
because Miami Beach was so dangerous at the time. Um, but now it's become, I mean, some of the most expensive real estate in South Florida. So, or in the state of Florida, really. So, uh, you know,
Really
you
nuts.
stick you if you buy a house in a lot of places and you stick around long enough, you'll certainly see the value, go up. And it's just a matter of patience.
No, for sure, for sure. But what's it called? How do we get it even? Hot dogs.
Yeah,
Love it.
definitely.
I do want to give a shout out to Sam
And
Chosak, just because I want to. Just because I want to.
what'd you think of his episode?
I love Sam Chosak, and Sam should do more podcasts. And this is a call out, and he should listen to whatever minute we're on right now. And I'm going to send it to him and be like, if you don't do more podcasts, I'm going to be very upset. But
He had a radio show.
I
He had a
know
radio show in college. I didn't even get to talk to him about that,
you
really.
should.
I'm going to get him back on because there's so many things that I want to talk that I love talking to him about.
He's just
But he had
a
a radio
well of
show.
knowledge. Like he's a treasure trove of knowledge of specific things, and like I specifically like when he talks because he knows. Like he's one of those people he knows what he knows and he knows what he doesn't know, and he's not afraid to say I don't know.
Yeah, of
And
course.
he's very
And that's a real
genuine.
skill.
Yeah. No, it's very like
Definitely. I love, yeah. So his radio show was essentially him just DJing in Binghamton, and to set the stage for what it looks like. Binghamton has, I think you've actually seen it before. They have this whole student affairs area. I forgot what it's called, but that's where a lot of the campus club offices are, and that's where the student bookshop is, and that's where a
right,
lot of the offices are in the cafeteria and the restaurants and stuff. And then they have the quote unquote underground, and in the underground they have this enormous archive of records and CDs and tapes and then they have this radio show, and so Sam would go and have he would I mean, I think he switched. Such a great story. I love this story, although it's a little too romantic to be productive, I think, or like to really advise people to do it. But he was an engineer for 2 years. He got a full-time internship, I think, or job as an engineer for, I think, a semester or for a full year, one of the two. And he did it and realized that he doesn't want to be an engineer, even though he's,
he is
brilliant and,
brilliant.
great at it. He doesn't enjoy it. So he came back to college and switched his degree to music, which he has a lot more passion for. And so he had this radio show and he just had the best voice for it. And he has such a wealth of music, like knowledge of music. And he would literally, I was with him. He and I would walk through the archive. We did a couple of times. We walked through the archive in Binghamton. It's such a fun experience because like music is all digitalized now, and while it's more convenient, there's something so romantic and fun about walking through, like and going through records and
Right.
going through album covers and going through. Holy cow, they have this, and oh my God, I haven't seen this record, this album in forever, and I never saw, I only saw this, weird version of this live concert like on Apple Music or on YouTube. I didn't realize
Right.
that like you have a, and apparently they do a really good job protecting it too. Making sure that nothing goes missing and that students aren't lifting any of
I
them.
love that.
But yeah, but so Sam has a real gift. I mean I don't know that he would ever really do it. I'm sure he'd be a regular guest in a podcast. I don't know that he would ever start his own show, but I think that if he did, he would be
He'd
phenomenal.
be a rock star. The guy just knows what he's doing, and like I know that he's someone who also doesn't like he's shy, which is funny. Like he's shy,
Hmm.
and like our
Right. So it gives him a social outlet.
exactly.
That will be a lot. That would be that's a lot more comfortable to him than going out to a big party or going out to a bar, going out, meeting,
Sure.
just meeting strangers and making new friends.
Listen, I think he's really great, and like I think for definitely for your podcast, him and what's his name, Michael. Michael also is a really
Steinberg.
yeah, Michael Steinberg is also.
You thought Michael was great,
I
yeah.
think Michael is great. I think all your guests are great. I think that it's just very it's just getting to the crux of things. Like let's say when you and Michael talk about his research and what he's doing, and it's very interesting, and then his books and all these things. And let's say Zach talking about his trips, and Oren Mendel talking about relationships and moving through it. And it's like funny because it's like not funny, like haha funny, but interesting funny where it's like we grew up with these people and now we're seeing them become these the dreams that they had and all these things. Like I don't know Michael, but I'm saying like Michael from a while back. I know Sam only from going up to Binghamton a few times and coming to Seattle. I know Zach very well. I know Oren pretty well. I know Ari Mendel well, I know Yosef pretty well, like all these things. Did you know that
And also, I think in long form, yeah, go ahead, Yosef.
Yosef and I were planning on starting a startup like a few years ago?
Really?
Yeah, very interesting
Yeah, he's
one.
very much a startup kind of guy. I love him.
I love him also. He's
I
great.
really love him. It's probably the problem. It's very hard to keep in touch with him when you're not with him. He's
I
one of those people
I
that is
hear
very
that.
present. But yeah, the other thing is also it's also fun to see is a lot of times when you hang out with friends, you're hanging out and generally speaking in lighter environments, and like especially if they're friends that you're catching up with, you haven't seen in a long time. You're having a lot more surface conversation where you kind of get snapshots. And then when you do a podcast like this, and when you're talking for an extended period of time, and you're giving them the space and you're prompting them to elaborate on on more than just the snapshots, you get more of more of an idea as to how intelligent and deep and structured and thoughtful these friends are. And not that you didn't know it, but that like you haven't seen it culminate in like a sitting or a conversation. Like you kind of know that they do, because they wouldn't be doing the great things that they're doing with their lives if they weren't incredibly capable, But to actually hear it come to fruition and listen to them talk and be a fly on the wall for, like, again, I think the best compliment that you or anyone has given me about the podcast is it's like listening to a wiretap of a phone call.
Yeah,
That's the goal. So, so we're having the intimacy of a phone call, and we're having the intimacy of a hangout, but we get to really, we have the freedom to pull out whatever strands you want for as long as you want,
right.
and kind of flow, and then you can kind of get more of a complete idea as to how well rounded a lot of people in this world really are. And I think it's so much fun.
I think it's also for me, it's exactly that because I definitely made that comment to you before. But for me, like moving almost September 25th will be 7 years. So moving seven
Right.
years ago and like, moving here and like having to make friends and make a quote unquote new family was always hard. And then I hear all these
Hmm.
stories of you moving to the city. I hear all these stories of you going up to Seattle and then this thing and then that thing and going to Ireland and then Zach going here and there. So like it sort of gives not just like it was all the FOMO and all these things because there are still moments where I'm just like, Zach flew down to Florida or you flew up to New York or you did
Yeah, and
this.
what was that like? And you kind of, and then if you tell, and then if you and I are texting about it or talking about it, you're like, oh, it was fun. Oh, we did
Yeah,
this. But like, you don't get the full experience
right.
of hearing like everything.
And I love it because it also gives me insight to like I think the cool thing for me is it gives me a lot of insight into, I know that you have a lot of other friends, like, and I know that you have close relationships with people like Zach or Mayor or Sam or any of these people. And it's so funny because it's like for me, it's like always I know I'm not the center of the world, but like our friendship is one of the centers of my world. So it's so interesting to see how
Right.
you divide your time between other people. And I'm just like, for me, like when I'm going to sleep, you're just going out to get drinks with Zach or, with Rachel or
Right.
with, someone else or with your dad or with this or with that. It's so interesting. And like, that's why I really think this podcast is super interesting to me. And you were super surprised when you heard me, not heard me, when I told you I was listening to your solo episode. And I find it very interesting. And I think a lot of your friends and like people that listen to you, find it interesting as well because it's an insight into someone's interesting life where you don't really get the insights to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and that's one of the, that's, I think it's important. And so when I, one of the things that got me really, really hooked into the potential over here was when when one of my older friends started his other podcast, Don't Worry About It, with a mental health associated podcast where he wasn't pretending to be any kind of professional, but he wanted to pretty much destigmatize the conversation and let other people know, because everyone, again, if we're looking at people's lives like these news segments or like these Twitter posts, you see everyone's lives in very, very short form. And you don't necessarily know. So, and even though you might like what you see in short form, you don't really know much more beyond that. And so there are guys what made me want to started to help him along and be a part and participate with his podcast was I heard conversations with people that I knew for years that I didn't even know a fraction of like what they went into. And then I look at them again, I meet them again, and I'm like, you have so much more depth and
Right.
so much more to you and so much more humanity and experience. And
100%.
not more than me, just more than what I thought you what more information than what was available to me. And I thought that itself. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not crazy for having a hard time figuring out relationships. Like I'm not the only one out there, and
Right.
I'm not the only one that is having a hard time finding, figuring out what I want to do with my life and finding my purpose and meaning. And and I'm not crazy for being that kind of guy. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm just it's everyone. So I think that by doing this. This is almost like a continuation or a tribute to that initial wonder and enthusiasm that I had for getting to know other people in that way, and then learning to love more about someone than just the news segment clips of their lives that I was used to,
Right.
and to say, yeah, you know what, there's so much more and there's so much depth. Also helps make you, by the way, it makes doing this, and I wonder if you notice this yourself. This has helped me substantially become a better conversationalist,
Yeah.
and I'm way better, even in the last month, at meeting someone new or talking to someone or talking to even family that like I haven't been in touch with, or spoken to as frequently as I would have liked, that I used to be close to, that it's giving me better tools to have better conversations and to kind of find more out about them. And
Right.
there's certain people that just, they themselves, like no matter how much prompting I do, they're so not used to the art of communication and articulating themselves that there's not much you can do about it. But there's a lot of other people that really, when you give them the space, all you have to do is just ask a question. All you have
For
to do is just give a
sure.
follow up. How do you feel about that? How's your job? Oh, it's the same. I go, it's the same. I have an uncle that's been commuting from New Jersey to Brooklyn every day for the last 30 years, and and his life has been exactly the same every day for 30 years. So I say, oh, what's happening? How's work? Oh, and then you always respond, same old, just usual. And I try to pry, and I try to, like, okay, well, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about your customers this week? Did anything interesting happen with the shop? And anything happen with the store? Like I'm trying to kind of dig, and sometimes it's more successful than other times. Sometimes he wants to just hear more about me. I don't think wants to elaborate on his own life, but all it takes for most people is just a couple of follow up questions, and it makes a huge difference.
For sure. And it's like all these things that are very important as well, where it's like, people do want to talk and people do want to have their experiences heard and people do want to have people understand them and people do want to feel a part of, like, I guess, a community where it's like understanding. And that's also something within the Jewish community as well, where it's finally you're seeing all these podcasts come out where it's like, I think Izzo is his name, right? Who did that podcast? Someone like Izzo, and then
Yeah.
you have something like Mislabeled, and you have all these other ones that are coming out, which are super, super great because, now people have the ability to be like, and that's something definitely that I said also, where I was like, huh, all these people have these anxieties. And even though, yes, you did mention Avrumi tummy to Michael, and I was like, why are you saying something like that? He's like, oh, I can definitely relate.
Ah.
I can definitely relate to that. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that a bunch of other people have anxieties around their stomach. And I didn't know this. And like, I used to have terrible, 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 terrible anxiety that I was like, oh my God, I'm crazy. I'm the only one. And then Michael goes on and says, no, I also have these things. Like I had these moments. And then you said it also. And I was like, I never knew you had, not necessarily like an anxiety about your stomach, but like, just these things where it's like, yeah,
Having to go to the bathroom is a big, yeah. Bathroom insecurity for sure. Like, if I don't know that I'm going to a place that I'll have easy access to a bathroom, then I'll have to pee, and then that will cause me even more anxiety because I don't know where I can pee and stuff like
for
that. Yeah,
sure.
for
And
sure.
it's something
It's
that,
weird.
yeah, I mean, listen, it's weird, but it's all these things. And like, I've been working on these things recently, and it's very mental. It's a big mental game for me, and it's like for years and years and years. I remember one time I came back to America and we were driving. I'm just like hands in my like pants, like not in that sense, but like right above my waistband, and just being like, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, and like all these things. Like I have all these stories with you where it's like, it's fine. I find it funny also where it's like Karen is like I will not go to the bathroom here, there, or anywhere. And I'm just like, I will go to every single bathroom in sight and the other one. Like, you know,
By the way, underrated. I am. I know this is gonna sound crazy. I love crapping on airplanes. I don't know. There's something about it that
it's the
I
sound. It's the
it's just.
sound. It's calming.
I don't know if it's a sound. I think it's. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I was like, first of all, I don't think a lot of people are actually doing it, so I'm pretty sure it's relatively safe compared to.
I think
Um,
you're in a cesspool of bacteria, anyways. And I think people neglect, like, people, this is where the science will come out of me. Like we're dealing with relatively the same bacteria for the same amount of time. They do ventilate the airplanes, and like yes, like the worst bacteria you're probably touching is in the bathroom. But again, like the same bacteria that's in the bathroom is 100% on your tray. Like like the tray from your seat. Like
no way, really?
100%. It's recycled air. I think MythBusters did an episode on this or two. Dude, the amount of fecal matter on your phone currently that you're touching is insane.
Yeah,
you inhale fecal matter, microplastics, whatever the hell you want to call back these bacteria. Your body just knows how to deal with it. And it's like we fly all the time, and this is why Corona is an interesting one to go all the way back to the Corona. Corona is an interesting one because now you're having all these diseases, not diseases, but like sicknesses come back because like you're seeing like younger kids get sick more often because they don't have the immune system that they used to have when you just threw them into preschool.
yeah, right,
So
right. That's interesting too.
and it's the Hirschman concept where you were like, I never get sick. We ate dirt as kids, like
Yeah,
So it's like
yeah.
it's sort of that's the way the world usually works. Thank God we have vaccines and all these things, but also I also like
I'm always going back and forth with my wife about where the line is between like healthy exposure to dirt and what's considered gross when dealing with the baby. Like
yeah
how much should we care about X, Y, and Z? And so she tends to be more cautious, and I tend to be a little bit more liberal with it.
yeah.
But hopefully we find a good middle ground. I'll get him, to really like it's okay to be exposed to, you know,
As long as it's not dangerous, meaning like dirt inside the house is different than dirt inside the house. Like dirt inside the house is dirt that we've created or brought in or is processed or something like that. Like to let your son roam around in grass that is quote unquote natural and has no pesticides and everything like that and does have germs and does have things and stuff and like God, I hope he doesn't have allergies to grass and dirt and things. But again, it's like it's relatively healthy to get down and dirty.
yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. I'm
Oop, lost you for a second.
hang on. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I got a call. Um, okay,
Oh,
sorry about that.
no worries.
I got a call. I'm very excited. We're gonna do a podcast. Hopefully, me, you, and Zach. Um, that when we're all in person together.
Yeah, we'll do one.
And I'm very curious. First of all, what has your experience been um, living in Israel for the last 7 years? When you come back to America, how different does America feel? And I'm going to be and I want to talk. And we're going to talk about again when you actually do get here in a week or 2 weeks. Um,
You want an answer
what you
now, or you want me to
feel.
wait till then?
Oh, both. I want you to tell me now
Okay.
what it's been until now and what you kind of think it's going to be, and then when we're actually in person and we're back again, then I want to know what your thought. Because at that point, by the time you come back by the time we're all in person, you'll have been in New York, New Jersey, Manhattan. At that point, will you have gone
Manhattan,
to
yeah.
Manhattan? Manhattan at that point. So like, so what was your experience going from one, I mean, Israel, like you and I were talking, for example, when you were looking to get like your apartment, and you're like, dude, like it's not like America. Like you don't move into an apartment that has a kitchen and a washer dryer and
Yeah.
necessarily even air conditioning. Like what have you noticed are big differences, and
Whew.
what are you expecting when you come back now?
How long do you got?
You got as long as you want.
So let's go. I'll go first year, and then I'll go to year seven because it really, first of all, the time flew. Like not flew, time went by in a good manner. Like it was very much a progression. Um,
Sure.
the first year coming back and forth. So the first time I came back was, I think, if I want to be exact, it was like November. I left in September. I came back for my brother's bar mitzvah in November,
Hmm.
and I was
In
suffering
Israel
in
or in
Israel,
America.
in Israel,
Okay.
in Israel.
What? How so?
Because when you first get like, both you and I went to Jewish day camps, sleepaway camps, and they preached moving to Israel, and they preached that it's the best thing to do, and I drank the Kool-Aid, and
Oh yeah.
and I loved it, and I was like, I'm gonna be Israeli, and like my Hebrew was getting better, and all these things, and like I was just happy to be in Israel for the first like 3 weeks, and then
Okay.
and then what happened was is that like, and you were very much there and like with it. It's like what happened was is that I got very tired very quick because I just didn't know what was flying, and me, this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed American who's a Zionist and all these things, was like, oh my God, this is great. I'm moving here. There's Hebrew everywhere, and everyone's so nice, and no one's that nice, period. But there are people
Yeah.
that are nice. But the problem was is that I was spending Shabbat, the Sabbath, alone a lot of the time. I didn't really have friends. I didn't know where to go. My roommate was never there, and I lived in a dorm which was a singular room. It wasn't like a
Right.
giant. It was like a classic college dorm, and like I would do
Right.
Shabbat, and like wasn't really a shul or a synagogue around that I can go to. So I was like, and I would call my dad, and I said, the worst part is that I just don't have anything to do, and I'm sad about it. And then I found a shul, and then I was like, maybe someone will invite me, but no one did. So my first year in Israel was tough. And coming back
So
to,
that was more socially though, right?
but also I can go into everything else where it was like understanding. Whereas like that was the first time I didn't live at home, and like I used to make money, and I used to mow lawns, and I used to have a good job. I worked for your dad for a summer, and like I was making good money. And then I come here, and like I'm on a scholarship, and it was basically $1,000 a month, and like 35 to 40% of that went to rent, and then 15 to 20% went to food, and then I didn't really know how to budget and all of these things, and like I would go out to bars, and like I just didn't know, and I was finding myself and like understanding and like thinking, oh, but I made dollars and I have money saved. Like it's a very weird. How do I say it? It was a very hard time on every level, because it
Well, you
was.
were transitioning. It's a complete
Oh
shift.
yeah,
Everything about life, everything about day-to-day life. The language is different.
a
The
hundred
culture is
percent,
different. The pay is different. The way that
a
you spend your
hundred
money is
percent.
different.
The thing is in
So
Israel,
what? So then
yeah,
you came back, and then what happened?
there was one time like
What'd you notice?
I came back and I noticed convenience. Like when you're in
Ah,
when you're in America, something is always open. When you're in America, you can go to a Walmart, you can go to a Kmart, you can go to a Sears, you can go to a 7-Eleven, you can go to a Starbucks, all these things, and service is key. In Israel, you're wrong. Customer's always wrong.
right.
Like, unless, and like, because like here's the thing, like, also, which is a very sad reality in Israel, and we spoke about chutznikim. If an Israeli, let's say it's someone who, a mover, or even at the bank, or a plumber, or someone, and not to say this happens to everyone or everyone does this, but
They see that you're not from there, they take advantage of you, right?
exactly, it's I'll call it the taxi cab theory. The taxi driver
Right.
sees that you're not as you're. That's even a funnier story. The first second I landed in Israel, I had two heavy bags which weighed over 50 pounds. And I go to a taxi, and I called my mom, and I was like, what should I do? Should I just wait for the train, or should I go for a taxi? And she's like, just take the taxi and whatever, you'll be fine. And I get into the taxi, and lo and behold, it was also a religious guy wearing a yarmulke, wearing a kippah. And I get there, and like back then, the normal price, from what I now know, was 100 shekel. And he's like, and he
Right.
not only did he tell me it was 130, which he didn't put on the meter. He also said, "Oh, there's a 20 shekel tip." And I said, "Okay." Lo and
Right.
behold, to find out 3 days later, when I spoke to my professor, where I was doing my master's, he was like, "How much did you pay for your taxi?" I'm like, $150. Isn't that like normal? And he's like, "What?"
Yeah.
He like laughed at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's crazy. It's true. Right. So they took, so that, yeah, they're much more.
aggressive.
By the way, that is that's kind of where I think like the Middle Eastern culture diverges, and America kind of used to be like that, a little bit more haggle friendly and a little bit more
Yeah.
like if you see, and it's funny actually because my industry is also like that. A doctor will call me and be like, "How much is this machine?" Be like, "Oh, it's 10 grand. I'll give you 8." Like, jump in a fucking lake, dude. What the hell? Like I'm telling you how much this costs, and he goes. And the problem is that because it's almost that I'm sure that there's a difference in terms, because of the fact that it's like refurbished or used equipment, they know that there's not really a quote unquote bottom line, or that the first price isn't always isn't always the only price,
Right.
as opposed to walking to a Walmart or going to Amazon. You don't tell Amazon this book's $20, I'll give you 14. Like you go to Amazon and you buy it. But if you went in, but and then Amazon will look at you and say, oh well, you're a fresh graduate. You probably don't know how much this cost. So I'm going to charge you, 30% more.
100%.
Like they don't really do that, but they do that. But Israel's financial culture, or I guess business culture, is much more like that.
Right. And that's the thing where it's like even you can go into these chain stores in Israel, and I didn't know this. You can go into the chain stores in Israel that, let's say, not the American Eagle, but I'll use it as an example. Like the American Eagle of Israel is a company called Castro. You can go to Castro and be like, listen, I'm buying 5 shirts. Can you make me a deal? And they'll be like, yes or no.
And they will.
What?
And they will.
Yeah. Not all the time.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. I have friends who do it, who have done it before. I have friends who are Israeli who have told me, yeah, like it depends on the day, but like if you say, hey, like I see this sale, like it's not going anywhere, like I'll take 5 shirts, give me another 10% discount,
Yeah, of course.
and
Right.
they'll just do it because they're like, listen, I don't. That's the last of the stock. We see it's not going. I'll ask the manager, and if I can do it, I can do it. If I can't, I can't.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
you
Right.
can't do it
Yeah.
like on an iPhone here. But to get back to your question, when I go back to America now, it's different. Like last year and I keep telling Karen this. Last year was the dream trip. Disney, Universal, seeing you guys, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, DC, New York City, New Jersey, Jersey Gardens, Teaneck, all these things. Dream trip. It was
Because you saw everything at its finest,
but that's what you want in a trip. That's why I love
for
America.
sure.
I love America, period. I am patriotic. I bleed blue to the day I die. I don't, and like if you told me now, come move to, like I wouldn't do it. But if you told me here's your postdoc, finish your PhD postdoc in Miami University, doing research that you love, knowing that you'll come back to Israel, I'd do it. If Karen was okay with it,
Right.
I'd
Because you
do it.
love being here.
I
Right.
always tell people were like, why did you move? I said, I love Israel, but if Israel didn't exist, I'd be in Miami. I'd be with
Right.
you in Fort Lauderdale. I'd be with you in Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like when I come back to America, there's a few things. It's sort of like I'll say it anywhere. Once when we were in Greece for Passover, there's sort of this realization that everything slows down. Israel is a very, 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 very fast-paced country, period. Doesn't matter where you are. You could be up north,
Right.
you could be down south, you can be in the middle, you can be anywhere. Israel is a very stressful place in general. I now don't live in the big city, quote unquote. I don't live in Tel Aviv, I live in Rehovot. And it's calm, but there's still the Israeli vibe where it's like, nu, yalla, move, like, go.
There's an urgency. There's an
There's
urgency to
urgency.
day-to-day life.
And and the thing is that yes, like you have it everywhere and all these things. Like I just fought with someone from the municipality to pay my city tax because I'm a new citizen here, I get a discount. And they're like, no, you can't do it. And I just went back at them. And there's this weird mentality of everything's a war. Everything's a war. Everything's a battle here. You have to pay taxes,
Right.
but they did the calculation wrong. Let's say the IRS, the Israeli IRS did the calculation wrong.
Yeah. Good luck on the IRS and saying, yeah, you did that wrong.
No,
Right.
but in Israel, that's the funny thing. You can hear.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but it's
And that's what I'm saying. That's a crazy difference.
yeah. Oh, good. Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's the craziest thing because I can call them and be like, you screwed up, you fucked up, you owe me money, and that's what happened also with the municipality in Tel Aviv. They owe me money, and good luck to me getting it back, right? Because that's bureaucracy.
Right.
Now, the
Right.
funny story I have about this is probably the best example to explain the differences between Israel and America is banks. Your mom has a funny story about banks. Your dad has a funny story about banks in Israel. Karen now has her funny story as a pure Israeli, purebred Israeli. In America, I went to go, when we were there last year, I went to close my bank account that I don't use anymore. I had about like 200, 300, 400, $500 there. I don't remember how much. And Karen's like freaking out in the car when we're driving there. And the bank from my dad's house to the bank is about a 5 minute drive, 10 minutes maybe.
Right.
And and we go. And the funniest thing happens is she's like sweating in the car. Just straight out sweating. She's freaking out. She's like, why are we doing this? We're going to waste all our time. We're going to do all these things. I don't understand. Why are we going now? You couldn't do this over the phone. I don't understand. And I look at her and I laugh and I say, watch. I tell her, take out your watch. I say, what time is it now? And I'll just throw out a time, 10 o'clock in the morning. I say, if we're not back in the car by 10:07, I will buy you anything you want in the mall tomorrow. We were planning to go to the mall. I said anything, no price, no price tag. You pull it off the shelf, you get it. We walk in, 10:01. Oh hi, his name is Agnello. I've known him. I opened my account with him 13 years ago. Hi Agnello, how are you? How's the
It's
wife?
crazy.
How's the kids? No, great, Charles. Great, good to see you. Okay, great. What do you need to do today? I need to close my account. Oh, wonderful. How's Israel? Oh, it's good. It's good. I'm really like that. I don't know how many times I'm coming back. Clock turns to 10:03. Okay, so just need to sign 2 documents and then we're good to go. Clock turns 10:04. Okay, here's the money. Are you sure you're good with everything? Yeah. Clock turns 10:05. We are out the door.
There you go. Right, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like that in Israel, huh?
No, now here's the other side of the story. We have a friend who's at the Weizmann Institute with Karen, who is, I think, an American, and she said she's moved back and forth between Israel and America. She's done it like 10 years back and forth. She said she's been trying to close her bank account for the past 7 years.
Oh my God.
7 years.
What do they say?
Oh yeah, we're closing it. Okay, then she calls back 10 months later. Hey, like I want to make sure that it's closed. She got an email saying we charged your account like seven shekel for the yearly fee. I'm like, I closed my account. Why are you charging my credit card? No, you didn't close the account. What do you mean? Close my account. No, you have to be here. She flies into Israel because she does research here, whatever. Goes to close the account. They says, okay, don't worry about it. We'll close the account. She goes back to America. Same thing happens 10 months later. Seven shekel, now 90 cents because there's interest. Okay, why am I
Right.
paying this interest? If you want the main reason, the main nose theme is exactly this. This is the problem. When I go back to America, it's easy. It's easy. It's not.
It's convenient.
It's convenient. I think I've always, from the day I moved here to the day to, and I most likely will say this when I come, because already I'm doing my Amazon order. Already I'm looking who has Prime. Already I'm looking at all these things. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. And I used to be very, in my second year of Israel, when I was in Israel, was much easier. That's also when you came to I'll call it the bird nest, when I lived in Ramat Gan. And
Yeah.
and like that was a great year. I met my adopted family and they really took me in. I actually spoke to them today and all these things, and it was really nice. And it's just really the word that I've always said to people is that if you're ready to live a life where you lose convenience, but you gain, the word in Hebrew is zechuyot, you gain
Benefits.
benefits. Yeah, you gain benefits.
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
I see it as
The
a
benefits of community, the benefits of family, the benefits of everyone looking at each other like they're like really a lot of
yeah,
people looking at each other like they're like there's some like I think I've noticed also there that strangers are much more inclined to interact and help one another in
100%.
Israel than they are in America.
I have a
I
funny.
mean, good luck if you. Yeah,
No, no,
go ahead.
sorry. Good luck. Go ahead. Sorry.
Good nothing. Good luck walking the street and there's a sketchy looking guy that starts bothering a girl you're with, and then
Yeah,
in Israel, 3 guys will be like, "Yo, what's your problem, dude?"
hundred
And
percent.
then in America, everyone will be like, "Listen, I don't want to get involved in
I'm
this. I don't
no.
want to be a
The
part of this,"
line that I've
And
heard always in America is "I'm no hero."
right,
In
I'm no
Israel, but in
hero.
Israel, but in Israel, it's very much, "Hey, what's going on?"
Yeah,
On our car that we got from a friend. Basically, he moved out of Israel and we bought his car. and there was a little bit of rust, and I had a spray paint, and I shook the spray paint like in the movie, like Bart Simpson shaking it to do it on the wall. And a woman comes over to me, and is like,
Hmm.
"Is this your car?" And I said, "100%." She's like, "Okay, have a good night." There's just that
What?
what you give up in convenience, you gain in community.
Right.
I've said this before, I think to you or on the podcast or in general, like I tell people, like the benefit that I have, which I did feel anti-Semitism in America. I did have people yell at me, "Hey, Shabbat Shalom, you fucking Jew," and all these things when I was playing basketball out
On Rutgers, right? And on Rutgers campus,
on
right?
Rutgers campus, outside my house, like things like that. And there was, I saw a guy peeing on the synagogue on my street, and he said, "Go away, you Jew." And I would go jogging with my kippah. Like I felt comfortable wearing the kippah outside my house, And I say
Right.
the privilege I have not only to wear a kippah, but to wear a kippah and not worry is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Especially in this time. And like I always say that, like, you know, Dafka yesterday, specifically yesterday, I went looking for my hat because I'm not going to be wearing my kippah in America. You
Well, I
know,
think you should, by the way. I don't think it's so bad too.
I don't think it's bad, but that's
I
the way I
mean,
was raised. I was raised sort of to be a little bit in fear, and I don't live in fear in
right.
Israel.
Right.
And that's really one of the
Right.
main things. And like, and I used to preach, oh, you can move to Israel, you can do it. I don't preach that anymore. Israel's not for everyone. As much as it is the Jewish homeland, and people should come visit and donate and make Israel as good as it can be and as best as it can be. I used to be, like I said, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and said, Israel is the only place. Oh my God, what are you doing anywhere else? Like, I don't believe it. I don't understand. No, Israel's
And you're like, oh, I get it. I live there now. Now I get why you're not here anymore.
Yeah,
I
but
get why you're here
but I
now.
get it. I get it in a lot of different perspectives. I get it for kids when parents are thinking about it, and then they're like they don't want their kids to go to the army. Karen's sister just had a baby, and like I think I've mentioned this before to you, and if not to you, on definitely to you on the podcast, where his dad at the bris was at the circumcision, the Jewish circumcision, was like, I hope that you don't have to go into the army. I hope that your generation is the generation of peace. And
Yeah.
it's very emotional, and it's sad because you have everyone in the room know someone in the army, has been in the
They're all
army.
veterans.
Exactly. So to
Yeah.
really culminate the whole idea, it's really convenience and understanding, and it's like it's Israel's a complicated place, but you can make it less complicated. But understanding that the understanding that if someone moves here is that you give up a lot. Like family wise also, like as much as whatever we can say about my family, like I missed out on my brothers growing up. And
Right.
I would have liked to, and this is something very personal that like I
Yeah. You text me when when you see them, like, holy crap, I cannot believe that this is him.
yeah, I couldn't believe it when my brother came. I think it was January, like almost a year ago already. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, he looked great.
He looked
He looked
good.
great.
And the thing is that what also made me sad is that my brother, his JAC won, even though it was tier three, but they won Sarachek. They won their tier in Sarachek, and I wasn't there.
Right, the basketball tournament.
Yeah,
Right.
sorry, the Jewish high school basketball tournament that happens basically is the Jewish not equivalent of March Madness, and
Right. But yeah, for Jewish schools across the country, schools fly in, they all go to New York.
for a weekend.
They all travel and they all go for a weekend and they play, they have, probably five different schools where they have different courts that they all play on, and every school is competing against one another,
Yeah,
and there's so much pride with it also because people like friends fly in and family fly and parents will come and bring their family to watch and to support them, because for a lot of people it's a highlight of their lives. Like,
right,
people will talk about their experience 10, 15 years later,
for
like,
sure.
it was such a great feeling having my family come and having my friends come and my girlfriend was there, and even though we're not together now, like, like just seeing them in the crowd when we're playing, and like you feel like $1 million, you feel like this is the world stage.
Yeah. No, I remember like
Definitely.
it was very emotional because I remember when I played in it,
Right.
it was like that's the reason why. Where it's like I don't really talk about it anymore, but I only talk about it because I feel like that's the thing that I gave up. If we're talking about Israel again, like those are the moments. Like like yeah, like you had a kid, like it would have been nice. We've been for the past 7 years basically talking every day on the phone, you know. So like we said before with the podcast, like I always felt like when I saw these pictures on Instagram that you would put up when you moved to Seattle, when you did all these things, when Ari moved to Seattle with you, when when Ari's brother got into Nova and he was in Florida and you moved to Florida and like Zach moved to the city, and like you sacrifice, and like thank God for technology, but you sacrifice a lot. You really
Yeah.
sacrifice a lot being here, and it's not the money, because if you have a good job, like you're making good money, you're doing well and all these things, you invest well. It's the same thing everywhere. You're not making American money, but you're also not paying for Jewish high school education. You're doing other
Right,
things
which is
with.
25, $30,000 minimum.
Right. So you're not doing that. But you could be saving money, you could be doing all these things. And like, listen, I don't, Israelis also, we're closer to Europe, so we're taking vacations to Europe and we're doing all these things and we're making sure we're having time. And Israel is very good about being family oriented. What's the problem with Olim Chadashim or new immigrants? You don't have that family. So
Right,
what do you do at that time? So the two words that I would say in the 7 years of experience that I have: convenience and sacrifice. And they do
right.
they do go together, and they do sometimes connect, and they do sometimes not connect. You sacrifice time
Yeah,
with family, like I saw a statistic that like after the age of 25, there's only about like 15, 16, 17 times if you move countries that you see that your parents until they die.
yeah,
Which
it's
is which
crazy.
is a, which is a
It's a crazy
scary
thought.
concept.
Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy thought, actually. I never thought about it like that.
It's something that really hit. There was a channel on YouTube called Yes Theory, and one of the reasons why one of them, I think, quit or moved out of America or any of these things was exactly that reason. His parents were from France. He moved to LA, which is also a 15, 16-hour flight. And he said the reason is because in the next, if you give my parents, if they're now 60, you give them at least 20 years, I'm only going to see them 7, 8 times. And that's scary,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah. It's crazy. So I guess we'll see.
We'll see how in
We'll
two
have to,
weeks.
we'll have to re exactly in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, when we're back in person, and we go through this, I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about what you guys experienced. And what like, I mean, I think there's such a there's a tremendous value to um, being an outside observer, because it kind of gives you a bit more objectivity, and like when you step away and then you look back in again after, you
Hmm.
kind of notice newer different things, and so I'm very interested to hear what you're going to have to think when you come back after being away for a year, but just like coming back in and saying, okay, like this is what's new, this is what's old, this is what's happening, this is what
Right.
I was expecting, this is not what I was expecting. So I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah, listen,
But let's call it here, dude.
for sure, dude.
Let's go with you. I have to take a shower still,
Of
and the baby's up, so I'm gonna hop in the shower and help take care of my baby. But thanks for coming back on, dude.
course.
And it's always a great time.
Yeah, we'll speak soon.
All right, brother. Catch you. Bye,
Catch
everyone.
you. Bye.
Say bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
There you go. Bye.